Hello and welcome to Mastering Dungeons. I am your only host today, Teos Abadia, my partner in crime, Sean Merwin. He is traveling and he has laptop issues and Wi Fi issues, and those are just the technological issues. So, I am just going to go through the news right now. So, if you're watching, there will be one part of the episode out currently, and then the actual audio podcast and an interview with a guest will be up tomorrow, a day after this initially dropped. Normally it's on Wednesdays, but the whole of it will now be out on Thursday for this week only as we adjust for the missing Sean. All right, so first question from our listener, Biotic Hamster, via our Patreon Discord. It seems to me, as a latecomer to 5e, that there was a genuine desire in the 5e design to favor DM Fiat in the rules. I'd love to hear folks who were there on the ground during the D&D Next playtest discuss that. Was that a real decision the designers made relative to other editions? This is a really cool question. What it's really looking into is the idea of DM Fiat is DM makes the calls, right? And the rules are open enough that you make the calls. This was super popular in older editions where things were not laid out and the DM could interpret, even when there were rules, they were worded so strangely that the DM still made the call as to how the game ran at their table. And you'd find each table ran very differently. So did D&D Next aim to do that for the 2014 version of 5e? I went back when this excellent question hit our Patreon Discord, and I listened again to that great, and I've linked to it again in the show notes. And I know we linked to it in a previous episode. I listened to the great D&D Next post-mortem video that Mike and Rodney did, two of the designers, Rodney Thompson, Mike Merles did, just after D&D Next finished and the 2014 books were coming out. And they talked about how they went back to look at old editions, wondering how it was that in these old editions, the rules had no guidance for some areas of play, including big areas like role play, right? But everyone did it anyway. So, what was it in the absence of rules that would guide good play? Why did it work? What were the editions doing that made that feel and work so well? And they found that old editions often had rules that dictated only about 30% of gameplay. Like most of what you think of a session, you play for an hour, 30% of that time were things that weren't addressed at all in the rules, right? What you were doing was not in the rules. It's amazing. And they saw that newer editions added complexity and tried to fill in these holes, but often then didn't create such a great play experience. And when complexity was added, it was often because the designers understood the basics so well that they would add more on top of what they already understood. But this was a lot for new players to take on. So the D&D Next designers created what they called the high wall. And before they would add any rule to 5e, the rule had to prove itself as being incredibly efficient, very easy to learn, and really worth it. In fact, they said that it had to support the game's goals and serve the game in multiple ways. So a rule couldn't just do one thing, it had to do multiple things, which is really fascinating. They also worked to remove barriers for new players or those who played older editions to come up to speed with a new edition, to make the game super approachable. So, yeah, it really was a thing in 2014 to open up the game, remove rules were not needed, and empower the DM. They talk a little bit of that more in one of the multi-part series videos that isn't this particular video I've linked to. But they do talk about how the game often doesn't need rules. Like they'll say, like, you don't need mechanics to play an elf, right? There's very little that you learn about what an elf is, and then you just go off with it based on all the things you know about the world. And that is certainly something they did. So, yeah, it is interesting to see how 2024 is maybe trying to do more to fill in some of those spaces that are there currently in the game. And does that mean that the game becomes too predictable and doesn't feel loose or open enough? It's a good question. Next listener question, Andrew B. Good to see you again, Andrew, via Twitter. Is the lack of, wow, they knocked this out of the park, reactions to the D&D 2024 playtest a concern? Sure, they learned from druids, crit changes, sneak, etc. But is it concerning that they are so wrong about the approach in the first place? This is a really interesting question. I want to kind of go, yes, it's concerning. But yes, but it is not concerning that they get things wrong. So a playtest is where you want to get things wrong. D&D Next did this all the time, since the last question was talking about this. It would experiment with something like expertise dice instead of skill ranks or skill proficiencies. And they would not see good results. So then they'd try something else, right? And in design, getting things wrong, and actually in life, is fantastic. In fact, teachers are more and more from like my generation, and newer teachers of newer generations are saying, hey, you actually want students to fail all the time. And that's true in design as well. You learn more from getting your design wrong than by getting it right. And right is easy because you just pat yourself on the back. Oh yeah, what I did is great. But it takes the right kind of questions and cross examination, teamwork, and playtesting to show, hey, yeah, this doesn't work for me, and here is why. Right? That teaches you a lot about design and helps you make things better. So in this current 1D&D 2024 5e design, the concern that I would have is less that some things are wrong to begin with, and more that we are not seeing the design attempts focus on clear themes or goals. So if we look at D&D Next, there were these really clear attempts to modernize the game while speaking to its roots. And you could play the various iterations and playtests that came out, many with things that they got wrong and that never got into the final rules. But you could see that there was an attempt to fulfill those goals, right? Like we are talking about DM Fiat earlier, to open up the game, to make things less programmable and reproducible, more open, more interpretable, more of a judgment call, and to open up how people approach situations with their characters, that it wasn't so siloed and predictable. 2024 has it a little tough because it is trying to be a revision, right? It's trying to say, I'm taking the same game and I'm just sort of polishing it. And so in that sense, it doesn't need to have new goals. It's just polish it. But I think that it does need goals, and it hopefully does have goals, and those goals have not been clear, which is why I'm talking about this. So the themes that you would expect of 2024 might be it's simpler so that more players can grab it more easily. Or it's more narrative because we see so many players learning by watching live streams. We see so many players wanting to have a greater narrative. There's less of that mechanical, just crunchy thing. That might be what you'd expect as a theme, as a goal. But arguably, if you look at the Unearthed Arcanas, the game that we're seeing makes 2024 more complex, potentially harder to pick up for new players. So we can take something like crit changes or inspiration changes, and the worry to me isn't that the attempt failed, but rather that it isn't clear why this was the attempt. So like crits are super fun for players, right? I run all these tables all the time, and when somebody crits, we celebrate it. In fact, I laughed when the crit Unearthed Arcana came out because just before that, there'd been the like two different examples of live streams that D&D played a part in, their staff played a part in, where crits were like the end of the event. You know, like that's how Vecna died, or that's how I forget what the other person was defeated with on a crit. Like crits were this huge moment, and so then take crits and lessen when they apply, when they could come up, was such an interesting failure, right? It's not just a failure, but it's a failure just conceptually, not even mechanically. Inspiration, similarly, inspiration to me is an attempt they did in 2014 to encourage a stronger narrative. So if you go and take away that narrative and you just say, well, inspiration is just like a candy you get for rolling dice, that can be fun and it can be engaging, but it's sort of in the wrong direction compared to what you'd think the direction they want to be is, if that makes sense. So that's a great example of where like inspiration might be super fun, that when you roll an even number, you get this, right? But it's not thematic. It doesn't accomplish your goals. And so that's where I'd say that I look at, and it can apply to anything, right? Feats, we're told feats are used by fewer than half of all play groups, but they're getting pushed onto all new players regardless of whether they like it or not. Epic boons, we're told very few groups play at high levels. And I don't think we have a lot of data about the people who do play at high levels, but hey, epic boons. And it just seems like that is the approach no matter what. And it doesn't seem to line up specifically to these larger goals. So I think the important part is learning. And what I would say, because maybe this sounds kind of harsh, I'm not trying to be harsh, I'm trying to be analytical. The important part is learning. And one of the things that I really love about the D&D Next story is the 5e Rogue. So the 5e Rogue contains all these things in it that were never part of the playtest. Literally, the design team learned from everything that took place in the D&D Next process, and then designed essentially a class we had not seen before. And it's one of the best designed of all the 5e 2014 classes, right? So we can hope for that. We can hope that all of these things, it will crystallize together for the team and they'll come up with a better place. Awesome question. All right. Craig of Inspiration via Twitter on our last question here asks, what's your go-to adventure for new players? So I have a couple of go-tos that I'll list. And I also have some thoughts around it. So great adventure that's written specifically for new groups and for new DMs is Scott Gray's Hidden Halls of Hazakor. There are links to all these in the show notes. So especially if you're a new DM, this is great. It provides an excellent example of like what I think this question kind of gets to, which is like, what do you want to provide as an adventure for new players is generally something that delivers on their hope of the experience, right? Player expectations are, I'm going to touch on fantasy themes. I'm going to probably go in a dungeon. I'm going to fight interesting monsters. They're going to be like ruins and old things, and it'll feel like I would think a fantasy adventure would, right? And this delivers on that. It tries to kind of hit tropes, takes you back to the town and then to the dungeon, and it really has great introductory information and really hand holds you through the experience, which is awesome. Another one, since he's not here, I can talk about his stuff. His intros that he wrote for Adventures League, especially Defiance in Phlan, Phlan, and Treasure of the Broken Horde. Those two adventures have short, like 30 minute and hour long adventures that all can link together. You can play them sometimes even in any order, some of them. But they're really short, awesome sessions that are full of neat play that is the kind of play you want to introduce to new players. And so those of us who've run these over and over again at conventions, like we know that tables just are super happy playing these. Great examples of things you can go to. From the classics, Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh is awesome, and it's been, updated to 5th edition officially. So you can use that. But that's a kind of neat experience, kind of mystery, going into a haunted manor to see what's going on. Really good. But anything that gives you that sort of relatively iconic indie fantasy experience is going to work well. And the most important thing is that you are going to be excited to run it. That's what will convey. If you can give players excitement, right? Never DM for new players like you're falling asleep and whatever. And I've seen this a million times. No, you want to be excited and right. Let that, like, your eyes should glow so that their eyes will glow and they'll get excited. Anything that you're going to really have fun running will work. But if possible, choose something that gives you a little more of an iconic experience. And any of these three would be fantastic. Okay, so those were listener questions. And now I and my pretend Shawn, let's see, we were using our Kuatoa there. So we'll use Shawn Moore and the Froghemoth for this next section. We'll do our news and commentary. So there was some official news coming from D&D this week. They had a new video and a community update. So we've seen a lot of these recently. The latest video and the community update kind of work hand in hand to try to clarify some concepts we've heard before. That 1D&D was a temporary name to capture all of the company's endeavors, from the core book updates to the VTT to D&D Beyond. And I guess people got confused. Like Shawn and I talked about this. To us, it was pretty clear that 1D&D, they did say early on, was a placeholder, but clearly that got lost, and some folks thought maybe it's called 1D&D or So, and then even the other part of confusion is that we even heard in official interviews that they would call it like it's like a 5.5 or what is it? They're pretty clear it wasn't a 60, but it wasn't clear how they're approaching it. So now they're really being clear about this is 5th edition. It's just the version of it that's coming out in 2024. And they said that to try to be clear about what they're talking about, designers will, just as we have, Shawn and I have been on the show, they'll say 2014 or 2024 so you know which version they're talking about. And what they did say that I thought was interesting, this is where Shawn and I would laugh a bit, is they said once the game is out, they will drop using the year. And I know Shawn would have a good laugh about that because good luck with that. Players are going to be talking, community is going to be talking, and you're going to have to refer to the old thing. We saw this when 5e first came out. They didn't want to call the game 5e. They just wanted to call it D&D. And it's like, well, good luck with that because people have to be able to say, what game are you playing? I'm playing 5th edition, right? You can't say I'm playing 4th edition versus D&D. It's old D&D. So I think that we'll continue to see that you have to say 2024 5e when you're referring to something that's specific to that new rule set. And the more that the game is changing, even if it's fully compatible, you're going to see that continue. We'll see. The video also explains that 5e is continuing because it continues to grow and sell well. There's no reason to stop it. It's been 10 years and they want to see this game go another 10 years. And so that's why they're doing this polish and this work. Okay. Then they do add a couple little interesting bits. They say they are rethinking subclasses. They for sure do still want you to get your subclass always at 3rd, right? And attempt to standardize all classes getting a subclass at 3rd. But, and they also say that they see levels 1 and 2 as getting your feet wet. Okay. But after you start your subclass, they're going to experiment with giving out subclass features at varying levels, not at the same levels that they were always coming out. The next UA is going to revisit the experts and the cleric, that they called it priest in the video, which is interesting. And you will now get the old subclass progression they used to have, and it'll differ by class. And that's really curious. I thought that all of this movement of the subclass to start at 3rd came from the Strixhaven project, where they realized that when they wanted to give you a subclass that would be like an academic course of study that would help any class be basically enrolled in school, right? They wanted to be able to do this at common levels where you get these same features, which is a really fun idea. Hey, your subclass will be setting based, but for that to work, we need you to all get it at the same time. So why are we moving away from that after all this work? I don't know. And I don't know that, I think that if classes were so incredibly different one from the other, that you needed to have certain gaps. Like if you knew that, like, say, a fighter gets feats every other level, then maybe you have a problem with odd, even, where can a subclass fit in? But to me, the classes are so overall similar, or at least not asimilar, that you would think the subclasses should tell sort of a consistent story and progression, and the point of them is to engage, and you could standardize it. But yeah, that's interesting. So you can check out the video on D&D Beyond and read the dndbeyond.com community update blog if you want to know more. And just hours ago, the D&D Adventurers League had a stream on D&D Beyond. Head of Organized Play Chris Tulak was on the D&D Beyond stream to provide an overview of Adventurers League. He has been on Mastering Dungeons before. And there are a couple of things that came out news-wise. It was generally a very good introduction of the way organized play works, what Adventurers League is, the different ways you can play it, where you can find rules and all of that. So if you're curious about AL, this is an excellent stream. We've provided the link in our show notes. I don't know if this will go on to their YouTube channel. Sometimes these do, sometimes they don't. But definitely check it out. They said that the dndwizards.com Adventurers League site is being updated. I don't know if they mean going to D&D Beyond or if this actually is being updated. But if you need files of the rules, there have been recent posts on the D&D Discord that pull everything into one place. So this is an excellent time if you're looking for files, you want to make sure you have all of the rules, you can finally get them at least in one place for now. I don't know why it's so hard to have these rules all in one place, but it is. And right now, you can finally get them. They also said that Planescape will be part of AL, and there will be a dungeon craft program to support it, meaning that you, a creator, can create your own Planescape adventure to be played as part of the official Adventures League by following the dungeon craft program rules. So there will be at some point a release about that. You can't post anything yet to the DMs Guild, but they will at some point provide the rules for that specific to Planescape, and you'll be able to write for it. Very cool. Moving away from D&D, ooh, this one's an interesting one. Upper Deck has sued Ravensburger, the game company, over the Disney Lorcana game. So Disney Lorcana is a card game, and Upper Deck is suing Ravensburger over it. And this is an interesting case that could have some impact on the discussion you often hear of you can't copyright mechanics, right? Because that's something that people always say as if it's like, of course, true. But a lot of lawyers will point out, well, we haven't really tested this in a true gaming context. We can't be 100% sure that that will fly. And what happened was that an employee under a non-disclosure agreement developed a card game called Rush of Ecor for Upper Deck. That employee then left and was hired by Ravensburger, where he developed the Disney Lorcana game. And he was under a non-disclosure, I think a non-disclosure agreement. So Upper Deck is saying that Disney Lorcana uses nearly identical mechanics and that this violates the trade secrecy in the non-disclosure. So this may center more on non-disclosure and trade secrecy than on really the case of mechanics, but underlying this is that issue of similar mechanics. And so it could have a really interesting repercussion. Now, usually these kinds of cases end up being settled out of court, but there's some big names here with Disney and Ravensburger. Ravensburger is an enormous company. So is Upper Deck. So it could be very interesting to see what happens if they. So far, Ravensburger is saying that this is completely baseless. The court date is set for November, which is after Lorcana launches. So we shall see how this goes. Shout out to Rivals of Waterdeep, who had their final stream. This groundbreaking show, Rivals of Waterdeep, has had a storied run across 5 years, 15 seasons, and 152 episodes, all beginning with the live game they had at the Stream of Many Eyes, which was the event run by D&D for the Waterdeep Dragon Heist adventure. And I fondly remember watching that first stream of Rivals of Waterdeep and how much fun that was. And I also tuned in for the last one, as well as many in between. And Rivals has had an interesting story because it was one of the official streams for the D&D channel for a while, and then it was dropped and its support didn't continue. So it then worked hard to try to have fan support. Through all of it, Rivals rotated DMs, which was a really neat thing, showcasing different styles and approaches. And of course, they had an all POC cast, which made it really groundbreaking in the area. I don't know that it was the first, and someone can correct me on that, but it was certainly one of the most prominent and really showcased the level of talent that we have in our industry. It's a show that was really overdue in our hobby, and at the same time, the right stream for the time. And it was great to watch the farewell. It was full of memories and tears, really looking back on the amazing characters, all the heart that was poured into the series by the cast, by the DM. So congratulations to everyone involved with Rivals, and really an incredible run, really impactful series. So thank you for that. Also want to highlight that D&D Beyond had an awesome blog called 9 Queer Creators to Follow This Pride Month. And writer Alyssa Vischer highlights 9 queer creators, their projects, their stories. Really an excellent article featuring some excellent creators that Shawn and I have had an opportunity to work with, some of them, and hobefully we can work with the others in the future. A really nice article, nice way of spotlighting, again, the level of talent we have in our hobby. And hopefully we'll see more articles like this from D&D Beyond. 2 more pieces to cover. One is Core20, the RPG with Scott Gray, friend of the show. Scott Gray has been previewing his upcoming Core20 role-playing game. And in this one, he focuses on backgrounds and languages. And there's some nice pieces of design here. One is the cool observation that in a fantasy world with a lot of danger, sign language would make a lot of sense, right? To be able to quietly communicate to one another. I wish I had learned sign language for many a secret conversation, as well as non-secret ones. But that this should be more prevalent in the world, and so he comes up with rules for that and writes about that in this update. He also has some neat ideas on backgrounds, which boost a set of skills rather than granting proficiency in a skill. And the boost is a +3 rather than, say, advantage or a focus or something like that. It's a little lower, but applicable to a wider range of spells. And backgrounds often offer a choice of feature that lets you kind of color what kind of background it is and tailor it a bit more. So, link in the shore notes or go to core20rpg.wordpress.com to see that latest update. And 2 items on crowdfunding and interesting releases. The crowdfunding side of things, The Last Caravan is a Cars and Aliens tabletop RPG. And this involves friend of the show and supporter, and superb game master Graham Ward. Um, this quirky RPG takes place in the aftermath of a seemingly failed alien invasion. They attacked, and things have been quiet. It seems maybe they were repelled, and you are going to road trip across the United States in a car caravan to try and reach a safer area now that the fighting has stopped. And the gameplay is about your road trip across the country and what you experience along the way in this caravan of cars. Created by Ted Bushman, the developmental editor is Graham Ward. It was funded on day 1, and you have until June 27th, so something like 12 days to jump on this. Very affordable. Check it out. It looks really cool. I backed this, and I really enjoy this. This to me sounds like a perfect kind of one-shot material to run with friends at a convention or late night gathering, things like that. And last, DM David releases The Curse of Vecna. This is available on the DM's Guild. It is his second product that he's releasing. David, we often highlight his blog because it's full of so many awesome insights into the history of D&D, the way DMs run, what players react to. And so he takes all of that knowledge and puts it into the adventures he writes. So his second adventure is called Curse of Vecna. It's for levels 8 to 10, and it starts with a child providing the heroes with a dark note that says that they are responsible for a crime. And of course, there's more to this. And this leads you to a ruined estate cursed by Vecna himself, it seems. So check out this product, The Curse of Vecna, on the DM's Guild. We have a link in the show notes as well, but you can find it very easily since it's a very recent product. And always awesome to get a chance to support DM David. So that's our news. If you're watching this, the main segment is something that I'm going to be recording tomorrow with a guest. So unfortunately, you'll have to wait 1 day for that. But thank you so much for watching. Greatly appreciate it, and I'll see you tomorrow.